Hey, what is up, Limitless Nation? Happy Monday. I hope you had a great recovery-filled weekend. We are rolling right into the weekend. We are coming in hot with MindGym Mondays, people, where you are going to learn the strategies, the tactics, the tools to help you get those good quality sets and reps in to train your brain. It's all about that practical application. And joining me today, always in the background, the Wizard of Oz, aka Mari, on the ones and twos. Thank you so much for producing this show and doing what you do. And also I'm joined by the lovely, the talented, the incredibly skilled Krista Ryan. What's up, girl?
Hello. So happy to see you, Andy. It's been too long, my friend.
It has been too long, and I'm so glad to be here with you, rapping about, a really awesome subject. So the topic for today, for MindGym Monday, we're going to be talking about showing up and showing out to show support with compassion, right? And it's something, and we're going to get to that here in a minute. But first, what I want to talk about too, so first of all, shout out to everybody who's joined us today. If you're carving out time here on your Monday at lunch, first of all, thank you for doing that. And we really appreciate that, especially all you stalwarts who are out there, who are always here, our fellow room tilters, anybody else who's joined us for the first time. Please be sure to download the Club Limitless app. And Krista is going to be doing the color commentary, and she's going to be flagging your questions and comments as we go along. But let's just jump right into it, Krista. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say good morning, Rebecca. I see you in the chat. Thank you for being here. This is going to be fun. What a great way to kickstart the week, right? It's Monday. I feel like this is, before we hopped on here, Andy and I got to talk and chat for a moment. I feel like this is a brand new season, Andy. My 3 kiddos went off to school this morning. I feel like this is a brand new season, and I'm so excited for this Monday. What a better way? Is there a better way than just to kind of work on those mental reps?
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about getting that, putting the work in, right? And I think fall is a great time. Even though it doesn't really feel like fall because it's still like over 100 degrees here in the hot as Hades, Houston, Texas. But I know kids back to school, my kids back to school. Fall is this opportunity to be able to turn over a new leaf, so to speak, right? And start anew. Kind of shed one set of leaves and grow some new ones here. So we're going to talk about this idea of training your brain, but I want to know what you're working on right now. Like, what are you working on to improve yourself and others in terms of brain training, Krista?
I think it kind of ties into the topic for today. I'm working on listening to understand without problem solving, which is a problem for me, Andy. Let's be honest. I'm a recovering people pleaser. With that being said, it's easy for me to go into the whole, I'm going to problem solve everything. I'm going to save the world by solving everyone's issues and problems where maybe they're not problems to be solved by me. So I think that's kind of why I'm excited about today's topic, because I can't wait to learn and grow with you and with those in the audience. I'm
it's great to hear that too, because I think for me, it's the same thing. It's the big thing that I'm working on is self-regulation, right? And so that's sometimes like, how do you create space? How do you, accept yourself? How do you be able to then, show up in a way that's going to put your best foot forward, right? And you and I are similar this way too. We're able to say what we think and feel, in the moment. And although that's a gift, I know that's a double-edged sword. So sometimes, hey, when do I just need to shut up and listen? And I think that's really poignant to what we're talking about today. So frame to me, you nominated this idea, and I really loved it, and I love the way that you framed the challenge, which is every challenge is an opportunity in disguise. So let's introduce this idea about showing up with compassion to support others. Like, why is this on your mind? And why is this a particular challenge? Do you think not only for us, who are in this business, but for other people who are listening?
Yeah. And for those of you that are here and unaware, a little peek behind the Limitless curtain. When we do these lives, we find out, a week in advance who we're going to be doing the live with. Therefore, we start to kind of brainstorm, we start to collaborate on the back end. So we don't just hop on here and like off cuff this stuff. There's some thought process that goes to this. So when I found out that I was going to be in the room with Andy, I thought, what a great opportunity to ask questions, to learn from you, to learn from each other, because I'm actively working on how to show support for others when I don't quite know what to say, or I don't quite know what to do, or I don't know if what I say is going to be the wrong thing, right? So I think this is top of mind for me because everyone's navigating something. Let's just be honest. If you turn on the news tonight, Andy, you're going to see a whole lot of things going on in the world, right?
Right.
So when I see that news, if it seems to go towards the negative, which oftentimes we both know it does, my human inkling, my natural response to that is to, ooh, what can I do? How can I reach out and support this person when I don't even know what to say?
Right. Yep.
So, and the reason I got excited with you in the room is because you have a military background and I do not. And oftentimes my military loved ones, yourself included, I'm always curious on what feels like support to you in certain moments, right?
Right.
So
yeah, and I appreciate that, first of all, on a personal level too, just by you asking that, right? Because, and we're going to talk about the difference between like assumptions and expectations here in a minute too, right? But sometimes we make a lot of assumptions, right? Educated guesses based on people that are based on limited information, right? And that can sometimes, sometimes we got to make decisions based off of limited information and very little relative experience, right? But we ideally want to be able to close that gap between, hope, assumptions, anticipations, and expectations. And the closer we are to having the same expectations, the more likely we are to be able to build those authentic connections that help us not only feel supported, individually, but also as a team. And I think that's super important that you said that too. And I think it's really poignant. And I want to hear from our audience here too, like, what is on your mind? We all have been in those situations where we want to support people where we don't know quite what to say or what to do, right? Where there's, we always know, and we talk about this, that it's all about being the thermostat, right? It's, being self-aware, being able to self-regulate, being aware of others and the environment, and then being able to then influence that, right? Those are kind of those 4 core competencies of emotional intelligence, right? But that what we control in our thermostats, the A and B buttons, right? That's our attitudes, our conscious thoughts, and our behaviors, our B buttons. So what Chris is talking about is, how do I control the A and B button? So for you all out there, like, what do you want to know about, right? What do you want to get out of this session between Chris and I that's going to help you know what to think and know how to respond when you don't know what quite to say or what to do? So go ahead and monitor that as we go along.
And let's call this out. Rebecca said, how do you support another when you're struggling with a circumstance that you feel consumed with? That goes into what you just said, Andy. And I think that let's highlight this and focus on that word assumption for just a moment. Because I think that is kind of the foundation for Krista's, I don't know if it's a breakdown, but self-awareness, right? Self-regulation. So oftentimes I make an assumption. So if there's something that's challenging happening in the world, like let's use, for example, the fires that recently happened on the beautiful island of Maui.
Great example.
All of a sudden I'm making these assumptions like, ooh, everyone's really struggling and everyone needs my support. And what can I do? I almost start to spiral based on assumptions, right? So as we all know, the limitless way is neutral. So neutral dives into facts. How do we get facts? Through curious questions.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, asking questions, maybe doing our homework, seeking to understand, right? And so, just real quick to define it, and take just a deep dive, not deep dive, but just to give you a kind of surface understanding of the psychology of expectations. And I'm not going to geek out too hard on you all, but if you want to know about expectations, check out Victor Vroom's work on expectancy theory. I'm not going to break that down here for everybody too. But
that would be a masterclass.
Yeah, but essentially, right, not everything is an expectation. But when it comes to interpersonal reaction, lack of expectations not being met, an expectation being a belief that something's going to happen based on 2 things, right? So when you believe something's going to happen based on one is credible information, right? Credible information that specifically can be actionable. And then number 2 is your relative experience, right? So if those are high, you have an expectation, right? And when those 2 are high, everybody can have an expectation, because we can both believe that, and we can both keep our promises, right?
Yes.
But when we're lower on those things, we have probably an anticipation, which is still optimal, right? But then the suboptimal zone is this area of assumptions, right? Which again, where I have limited credible information, I have limited experience, and then there's hope, right? Which hope is a great, powerful emotion. Not going to deny it, but it's not really a strategy, as they say. So,
right.
But so how do we move? So I guess the question is, how do we move from, for example, assumptions in the, let's use the Maui fires case, for example, to more of an expectation in terms of what I can do. And if I can, I just want to share a quick story to your point, right? Because I have
Yeah.
a really good friend, one of my best friends that I played football with in college, Harry Carey. Shout out to him and his beautiful wife, Akiko, and their 2 kids. They've lived in Maui for 10, 15 years now, right?
Yeah.
And like I've never been there, so I don't really concentrate for where it is. And so you hear about the fires in Miami, and my assumption is like the whole island's like ablaze, right?
Right.
The reality was something different. Again, I don't want to downplay the tragedy, but what would I do? What did I do? I reached out to Harry, sent him a text message. Hey, is everything okay? Hey, yeah, Andy, we're good. I was on a group thread track, so everybody was concerned about Harry
Yep.
and some close friends or whatever. Well, then, but then I left it at that, right? And so did I show up and I show support? I guess maybe,
Yeah.
but maybe I was showing, some sort of empathy, but I wasn't moving from compassion, right? Which is really
Yeah.
the optimal zone. So empathy being, hey, I'm aware of how you're thinking and what you're doing, and I can think about how you're thinking. I can think about how you're feeling. But compassion is then having empathy and then being in a position to do something about it, right? So
Right.
I'm going to hold that there for a second too, but I'm going to talk about my wife did actually show compassion, but like from your perspective, I want, how do you go from sympathy to empathy to compassion from your perspective? Maybe using an example, Krista.
I think that's a really challenging answer. As you're navigating the story, I'm a visualizer. So I visualize this journey as almost like a roller coaster. So I'm standing on a platform, right? And I'm watching this up and down, the up and down of the roller coaster. So the question I'm asking myself is, do I get in and sit next to this person and go along on the ride? Does that support them, or am I actually supporting myself, Andy? And that's a question I oftentimes need to ask. Like, is this response that I'm acting on right now? Is this for me, or is this for others? Because oftentimes I'm uncomfortable. So I want to dissipate that feeling. So then if I'm acting in that way so that I'm more comfortable, does that actually support the other person? And that's where I'm really understanding the power in the pause. We talk about it all the time, but the power in the pause and asking, like, is this response in the moment supporting myself, or is it supporting the other? And for me, so I have ties to Maui. My family lives there. We've got a lot of friends.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
So I have been doing this, navigating like this, because I can quickly attach myself to the story and scenario. And then all of a sudden I'm like, holy cow, Krista, this is not about you. This is not about you. You're not involved in this story in that way. So what can I do? So I decided, like, what I can do is literally pause and take a deep breath and then open up space, letting others know if they need me, that I'm showing up in a way with open arms and open heart. And I don't know what else to do. And like, that's verbally what I said. Like, I am not sure in this moment what to do to support you, but here's my heart wide open. It's like wide open, and it's open to accept you in whatever that may be, whether it's a verbal venting, whether it's a, cry, whether it's whatever that is, that I'm allowing space for that person to show up, or that community to show up to me. And I don't have to have the answer, if that makes sense. Oftentimes I'm like, let's solve all the problems. It's not my problem to solve. But I could be part of the problem if I don't do anything. If I do nothing.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think, you just having consciously shifted your attention from internal to external is really, really important, right? Because then you're making it about me and about them, because you're thinking about, what do I say? What do I do? So, which I think is really important in the planning process, which we'll get into here too, right? But what I want to show here is because what Krista's describing here is making this progression, right? Mari, if you don't mind showing this, is a great graphic here that I love. This comes from a HBR article. You can check it out too. And so this really shows you the difference. And if you're a Brene Brown fan, you've seen this cartoon of the animals where she's, the animal cartoon is actually, acting out her famous TED Talk. And so, for example, so this is what pity is like, right? This is kind of like the cartoon animal, so one animal that fell down in a pit, right? The pit of despair, right? And the one animal is, kind of up on the edge, seeing the other animal down in the pit and saying, oh man, I feel sorry for you. That, or it sucks to be you, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's really suboptimal. The next thing, which a lot of people do, is they move to the sympathy thing, right? Saying like, oh
Yeah.
man, it sucks to be you, and I feel really bad, right? I'm sure a lot of people have been in those situations too, but then, that's still really in the suboptimal zone. But we want to move, to really be, high performing versions of ourselves, whether it's a friendship or it's as a leader. You want to move to that empathy zone. This is where emotional intelligence really comes in. Where it's like, hey, I'm feeling this with you. Like I'm actually getting down in there with you to experience what it's like, And so,
Yeah.
great example. So like, okay, we are not in Maui, but Krista's a great example. She has a mental model, a construct of what's going on there, right? That I don't have. But then the next level is like, okay, what can I do about it, right? So what Krista just showed you is like she went right to empathy, but now she's creating space to not solve a problem, but then allow the other person to then tell you what can you do for me, if anything, right? Because sometimes
Right.
people are in, especially when they're in a difficult situation. I mean, and we've all been there, I mean, flip the script. Like sometimes I don't know what you can do for me right now.
Right. And just having that question can feel unsupportive. Like, I don't know what I need,
Yep.
And we have a really interesting conversation happening in the chat. So let's
Yeah,
address
let's
this
flag
because
that. Let's go over it.
I think it's really important and it's very, very interesting. So Gus, the question here is, what's the first step to help people that reach out, take control of their day-to-day, the fire drills, that keeps them in a negative, sorry, I lost it, energy state, and move them more towards neutral. So, right. So when someone is reaching out and they're just in this negative, I call it negative Nancy, right?
Yeah.
Negative Nancy. I'm going to blame, I'm going to complain. I'm just in this low negative energy flow. The question there is, what's the first step? My challenge there, and Gus, thank you. What a beautiful question. My challenge for myself is sometimes it's not up to me to have them make the move. It's up to them. And that is my go-to. Right away, I want to solve their problem so that they can get out of that negative energy state and they can get to a neutral, right?
Yeah.
The best way I can support someone in that moment is by asking them just a simple question of, is there an alternate way that you can view this situation? And sometimes their answer would be no, not right now.
Yeah.
They're
Right.
just in that negative state, and you can't force it faster than they're ready to allow.
Yeah, that's a great. I mean, it's a great question. I think just by asking the question, again, that can create the opportunity for them to maybe get to neutral, or maybe they're still stuck in that negative space too. Which again, it's really natural when we go through a difficulty to experience a negative emotion. It's when we get caught in that cycle that we get in trouble, right? So again, like you're trying to influence them moving to neutral, but they may not be ready. They have to do it on their own accord. So I really love that idea of proposing the question of like, hey, what's another way that you could think of to what's another perspective here, right?
Yeah. And like Rebecca said, great comment there. I have a good friend that I experience this with sometimes, and I have to distance myself because of that pessimism starts to affect your own energy and outlook. Absolutely. So if you surround yourself with negativity, it can rub off and really affect you. So self-protection is important in those moments because you cannot expose yourself to that. And if you do, because you're trying to be compassionate, right? Trying to understand, if it starts to affect you, that's almost self-sabotage, self-sacrificing yourself for others. So there is a huge important piece of protecting yourself so that you can show up the best for you and therefore the best for others. But if it starts to affect you in a negative way, there is value in really being like, ooh, pause, hold on now. I'm actually sabotaging my own success in this moment.
Yeah, it's a great point, Krista, because like again, you don't want to get sick. You have to protect yourself as well too, right? And then you have to show empathy and compassion for yourself in terms of, because sometimes you can take away from and subtract instead of add to in this case. And I think sometimes if you're going to offer up something you could do, keep it very simple, right? And I think great example that just happened to me recently is unfortunately, and I've talked a little bit about grief and how you can show compassion for yourself recently in these forums here too. So this is really building off of that. It's kind of timely. is that, so I'm part of a big rugby community here in the Woodlands, Texas. I'm a coach. I'm their mental skills guy for the youth level. And one of the presidents of Texas, the Texas Rugby Association, her husband's going to be my son's coach this year too. Her name is Maggie Rouse. And unfortunately, Maggie, she had been battling cancer. It came back, and she died suddenly as a result of the complications of her cancer. She's a Navy veteran. So the Rouse family is this amazing family, and just left this huge hole in our community. And so I just felt, again, the natural inclination is that you kind of avoid because you don't want to know what to say, or, oh, this person's busy, or they're going a hard time too. And I did the opposite of that. So I leaned into that. And so I called Kip on Friday, and it was just really cool. And this isn't hey, this is not about me. This is about using this as an example of maybe how you could show up for someone and what you can do to show compassion. And number one, I said, hey, how you doing? How you doing, brother? And I created space, to your point, and he broke down, and he broke down. He was talking about the morning time and how that was him. And the hardest part is the morning time. That's when he had coffee with his wife, where the kids they had 10 kids together. And the 3 of them were in the armed services. She was a Navy vet, and they still have kids in the house, and he had a chance to process that. And it was super emotional. And we got a chance to, and I got a chance to ask about what happened, because I didn't exactly know what was happened. And then we started talking about the funeral service. And then I said, hey, I know Maggie was a veteran, what's the plan for the services? So he told me, and we're going to have a service tomorrow. I said, hey, I don't want to impose, but do you guys want an honor guard to be able to show up? And because they do the flag, they play tap, sometimes they do.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a small package, big packages, she would love that actually too. And I said, well, hey, do you guys need some help with that? Andy, I would love that. Right. And so I did. And so I spent the last couple of days tracking down the local VFW, and we got an honor guard, and they're going to show up tomorrow for the service. Yeah. And that was just so being able to take a little bit of burden off of them.
Yeah.
So I could have assumed that the funeral home was going to take care of it, whatever too. But again, that I was able to offer up something to him that was related to my relationship with him and Maggie, to be able to then show that I cared as a friend, as a fellow rugby coach and member of a community, to honor the memory of Maggie. And so and again, did that make me feel good? Hell yeah, that made me feel good. But at the end of the day, it wasn't about me. It's about honoring Maggie, honoring her life, helping the family out in a difficult period of time. So I just wanted to offer that up.
I think that is, and I want to highlight, Andy, what you did there. So you didn't just say, hey, how are you doing? You actually did the thought process behind the question of, like what we said earlier. Sometimes people, when they're going through a challenging moment, they don't know what they need. So allowing yourself space to pause and then ask creative questions, like, what can I do in this moment? What is something I could do in this moment? So you thought through that. You came up with something that you do have control on, right? Oh, I could take the reins on this and actually set this up. So then asking if that would be something that would feel like a good support for that individual. And the answer was, oh, yes. Like, had you gone up and just said, is there anything I could do? That the answer easily could have been, I don't know. I don't know what to do. But you had that creative thought, the curious question. And I feel those are probably the most supportive questions when I'm navigating anything that's a challenge, or I'm not quite sure what I need. I really do appreciate the thoughtful questions that come from individuals saying, I'm not sure what to say or do in this moment, but I've thought of something. Would this be helpful to you? That shows such a deep level of compassion and love and understanding. So maybe that's part of the action of this conversation, right? So let's make this sticky and actionable. These go way too fast with you. I could spend like an hour and a half just on this topic.
So, and to your point too, I want to offer, a mental model for you all to go put this in action. I want you to hear what this looks like, right? Is the TED model of coaching, right? This is kind of some coaching 101 that we're sharing with you too, and how to ask opening questions. A part of being coaches is what Krista and I do, for a living here. One is the TED model. One is tell, explain, and describe, right? Yes. And you think about it, and again, treat showing up with compassion as a performance, right? As you're going to go execute a task that's really important, just like you would, doing a free throw or a penalty shot or a pitching to a new client, right? Treat it like a performance, right? We actually,
Absolutely.
yeah, you actually sit down and write this down, right? So, and then you're practicing. You have a model to be able to, like, again, going back to the KIP example, right? Hey, tell me what you're going through right now.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
what explain to me, like, what's the hardest part about this situation that you're doing. Same thing with Maui. Hey, describe to me what's going on over
Yeah.
there, right? And
Yeah.
then I stop and I let them talk. So the TED tell, explain, describe model is a good way to enter in with curiosity, so you can seek
Yeah.
to understand, and then creates an opportunity to then lead towards something that you can actually do, even if it is just offering up an open-ended thing to say, hey, I'm here for you, right? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts, Krista?
I think it's beautiful. I oftentimes use the language because I'm a visual person, Andy, and then I oftentimes will ask or tell people like, can you paint me the picture of what this
Yep.
looks like for you?
Yeah.
Just paint me that picture. And
Right.
that's where then the words start to come out, like in your friend's example there. Mornings are really tough because that's the time when I'd have coffee, where
Yeah.
that picture may not have been painted that way if you
Yep.
hadn't asked for those details. Like,
Right.
paint me the picture of what this is looking like for you.
Mm.
And then through that paint, through the artwork that's coming out in language, you can start to find little nuggets where you can enter in with compassion and love and support, right?
Right.
And I oftentimes too, if I'm going through something, I'll say, I'm going to paint you the picture of what this is looking like for me right now. And
Yeah.
then through that, it's kind of like an artistic way to communicate, but I don't even know sometimes what I'm asking for in regards of support until
Right.
I painted the picture, and then they're
Yep.
almost like coaching back to me and saying,
Yeah.
I'm hearing that morning coffee's challenging for you.
Mm.
Let's go out for coffee tomorrow. Would that be supportive? I'd be like,
Nailed
yes.
it. That's a
Let's
great
do
idea,
it.
by the way. That's a great idea. I'm gonna steal that. It's a way to offer that too. Again, that's and we're talking about it too,
Yeah.
because sometimes when I'm in it myself, we're also sharing best practices right here too. You
Yeah.
know, Krista, can what are some things that that you would, if you do action steps, maybe the audience has some here too. If you were to
Yeah.
tie a ribbon on this sucker for us here too, to be able to go, hey, what can we go? How do we put this into action to get good quality reps?
Yeah.
Showing up with compassion.
I think for me, the action steps that I would challenge everyone to take are super simple. And it would be allow space to pause
Yep.
and then think of thoughtful, creative questions that you can ask, because you're not solving problems. You're not supposed to. Your place that you can show up with compassion, love, support for anyone is through creative questions, because you never know, in the listening of these questions, you may hear, you know what, Andy, Krista, the best thing that you could do right now is just give me space. And the assumption I would be is like, oh, I'm gonna overload you with love and hugs and whatever. And they could be like, you know what? I could use some space.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Let me
How
get
about
back to
you? Yeah. What would be your action sticky takeaway?
Yeah, I think, for me, it's, asking very specific questions that allow me to be able to meet them where they're at. So we have the same expectations, the same mental framework, right? To me,
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing to do. If you don't know what to do, start with TED, right? And again, sometimes, being compassionate, and being empathetic, or they look almost they look very, very similar, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you don't insert yourself to do something that they don't want you to do, right? Allow them to then tell you what they need in that moment, which may be space and time to actually figure out what those action steps are too. And a great example like the Maui one is a GoFundMe page. I did clear that
Yep.
story too. So there was really nothing I could do here from Houston when they're at Maui. How can we help the people that were there? Well, Akiko, my buddy's wife, said, hey, here's the GoFundMe page. This is legitimized. You could donate to that too. So that was actually something that we could do to be able
Yeah.
to show up for them, and these are just the everyday little things that we could do. I just want to give a quick shout out here as we wrap up here too. My, Krista, she's a humble servant leader, and she's not going to be talking about herself, but you've got a book that's out there too. And I encourage everybody to go check this out. So
Thank
Krista's
you.
not only an author and a speaker and a super mom and, business owner and everything else, all the things, right? But can you just tell us really quickly about KFG and where we can go to be able to support you with the book?
Of course, yes. KFG is my motto, keep effing going. It's really my action step of life. And the best way you can support me and others is I have KFG merch, which are shirts and sweatshirts.
Yeah, I should have wore it today, by the way.
Yeah, if you go to KristaRyan.com, the store is up and live, and 100% of all proceeds are going to those that are impacted on the island of Maui. So I didn't know what to do. That was one thing I had control on. So I was like, 100% of any proceeds will go back to the island of Maui and supporting them. So that's the best way you can support me, is through others. So Andy, thanks for the shout out. I appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure. This is exactly what we do for each other. Again, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today to our Limitless Live MindGym Mondays, where we're talking about practical, actionable steps about how you can show up and show out to support others with compassion. Krista, thank you again. Mari, thank you again, everyone. Be sure to download that Limitless Minds app. Follow us. Tune in same time, same place tomorrow for great content that's going to help make you better. We'll see you in the arena, and keep fucking going.
KFG. Love you all.